I'm pleased to be joined by former Oklahoma coach and one of my favorite coaches, Cale Gundy. Cale, how you doing, Coach?
I'm doing great. Thanks for letting me come on your show.
I appreciate you taking some time to talk with us because, well, we saw some good things, we saw some bad things when Oklahoma played Tennessee in its first SEC matchup. I think we're all in agreement that the defense is pretty damn good. However, Coach, you being an offensive coach for 23 years at Oklahoma, a national championship, 14 Big 12 titles, if I got that right. What do you
Yes,
see, Coach? What do you see?
I see a great defense that gives us hope, and the script has been flipped in many years from offensively being the team that is the most dominant side of football, and winning games 45-13, 45-17, or 45-24, or whatever. And now all of a sudden, I mean, you're in the SEC. SEC is a little bit like the NFL. Most games between two good teams are going to be in the 20s anyways. It just is what it is. So everybody's got to get used to that. But I am so excited about this defense. I mean, as an offensive guy, I appreciate it. It's hard to. There's been many times that you have to go out there and score 40, 45, 50 points a game to win a game, and but we never we knew that, but we never let it get in the way of us being a team and continuing to play together as one. So the defense has got to carry the offense. There's no doubt the offense is having some problems, struggling, but the defense is good enough, which we saw last week versus Tennessee. It's just unfortunate the level of competition has stepped up, and from here on out, except when you play Maine, you're going to be in a dogfight every Saturday.
Stuck my neck out because that's what I'm going to do. Folks that know about me know that I cover the sport nationally, but I got here talking about Oklahoma, and I'm from Oklahoma. So the thing that I would tell people is that it ain't so much that Oklahoma got to be ready for the SEC; it's that the SEC got to be ready for Oklahoma. All of a sudden, we got folks that one don't want to acknowledge the defense, but also are looking at the quarterback position in particular, and not really taking into account how the offensive line may or may not be working and being healthy on the outside. I wonder, do you think I'm going to be right in the long run, or are we just going to have to stick through this?
No, you're going to be right in the long run. There's no doubt. If the defense is playing at this level, why can't the offense play at this level? For 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, we would never have said this about the defense. It'd have been, the defense is the side of the ball that's going to struggle, and they're going to get beat to death. The offense is going to keep us in games. But that's not the case now. So, but if the defense can do that, if Brent Venables and his defensive staff can get it to that level, why can't the offense get to that level? And the offense has been at that level. I mean, we've had plenty of offenses around here for many years that would step in the SEC and compete against anybody and be one of the very best teams in the SEC. So, I have faith because if one side of the ball can do it with the players that you have there, there's no reason why you can't do it on the other side of the ball as well.
What makes that defense so good to your eyes? Because I'm looking at some of the things that they're doing, and some of it seems fundamental, but those fundamentals weren't there 2 years ago. And then
Yeah.
last year, it felt like it was coming into fruition. And this year, it feels like they really know what they're doing. They're locked in.
Well, what they do on that side of the ball with Coach Venables is they're very multiple. Okay, so that's why it takes time. I mean, it takes time to really learn that defense because they're going to do a bunch of different things. They're going to put those guys in a bunch of different positions. They're going to disguise. They're going to have blitzes. So it's very complicated to learn. I mean, it'd be like trying to learn some Chinese. I mean, it's going to take you a while to do that. As a matter of fact, you can probably learn Chinese faster than you can learning that defense. But that's why it took some time. And here's the other thing: what they did is they recruited very well. I mean, they have a solid two deep on that side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, that can play in a two deep for anybody in the country. There's no doubt in my mind. And they got the right mentality players. They've got guys not only that have good size, but they got a lot of skill guys, the linebackers and DBs and safeties, and those dudes fly around. And that that could be because when they recruited them, that's the type of players they were in the mentality that they had. But it was probably also developed once they got here as well. So they've got 22 players that they can throw out there that they feel really good at. And what Brent does defensively is as good as anybody in the country. I mean, he threw out there a different defense Saturday night versus Tennessee than he's played the first three games. So, and that doesn't surprise me at all. And I saw a lot of things that in the run game that Tennessee was doing, even though Tennessee at the end of the night had, pretty good average running the ball, they stuck with it. But there was some, they were playing, OU was playing two robber and their corners are cutting. They're 5 yards off and they're inside. So as soon as they see run, it's like they're blitzing. And so they're knifing in there. And when the running back's coming outside, because that's where the space is, all of a sudden there's a body there. Well, you can't cut back inside because they've got a linebacker or somebody flowing over the top that's in that gap. So they're complicated over there. They've got really good football players, and they're being coached really, really hard.
Feels like when it is working, it's working really well, and that's always been kind of a tenet for Coach Venables. Whether it was at Oklahoma or at Clemson, when everybody knows what they're doing, they're really difficult to stop on that side of the ball. I'm glad that you brought up how well they recruited defensively, because this national show, Coach, but I'm going to introduce folks in a way that I don't think they understand. Coach Gundy is one of the best recruiters that ever lived, and I don't mind saying it. I really don't. He's up there with Coach Switzer, and as far as some of the guys that he helped bring into Oklahoma, Adrian Peterson could be the only guy we talk about. That could be the last guy. That could be the first guy. But so many of these guys that came to OU came because you were able to tell them what OU was about, and I want your insight given today and where we are, transfer portal, name, image, and likeness. We're operating like pro ball clubs. What would you be telling, or what do you think the kids are hearing when you say, hey, come play football at Oklahoma?
Well, first of all, it's a challenge because you don't, because of the transfer portal and the craziness that's going on. I lived off of recruiting. I lived off of recruiting because I started and I found guys when they were freshmen and sophomores. And I mean, for 3 years, I got to know them up and down, got to know everybody in their family, all their coaches, have really deep conversations and, told them what it was going to be like when you got here. And I'm a upfront 100%. I'm going to tell you there's going to be great days and there's going to be days where you do not like it here. And guess what? That's called life. Just go ask the person, go knock on the person next door to your house, and he'll tell you the same thing, or she'll tell you the same thing. Yeah, there's days I like life, and there's days I don't like life. And but you got to work through those things. I always believe that you got to prepare them for what's about to happen. And if they're prepared and they've been hearing this for a year, 2 years, 3 years, then it makes it much easier when they get there. Out recruiting Oklahoma players now, they're in the SEC. They've got to have some success. They've got to get up there and get in the top 3 or 4 in order to, in my opinion, sustain some recruiting level that they've been doing. They've had some success and done a good job recruiting. But if they go through 2-3 years here and can only win 6, 7, 8 games, it's going to be much more difficult. And I don't think that's going to happen. But if that does happen, it's going to get harder. They're able to go out on the road right now and tell young men, hey, come to Oklahoma. We've got all this history. We got these championships. We can do this here, and you can be a part of this. And so, as we all know, most of the best players in the country are from the southeastern part of the country. So you're asking young men to leave their backyards in Alabama's and Georgia's or Florida's or wherever, and to go halfway across the country to play in the same conference where you could stay at home and let your family and friends and everybody see you. So they've got to have success in order to continue to get some of those guys out there, because if they don't, I think it's going to really be hard on them moving forward.
I think you're right, Coach. I'm thinking about it from an NFL perspective. There are more NFL players this year from Mississippi per capita than anybody else, right? Florida, we know what they do. Georgia, we know what they do. Texas, we live in Texas, right? That's home base down there. I got to ask it this way, Coach. You were recruiting when USC was USC, right? When Texas was going through it, when Nick Saban was getting LSU up and going, and it felt like you were recruiting against those programs as well, but you're doing it in the Big 12. What's the big difference between trying to go get the same guy from California as you might in the SEC?
Well, nowadays everybody's recruiting everybody,
okay.
And it used to be years ago, especially just take Texas for an example. There used to be three. I mean, if there was 15 great players in Texas, let's just say 15 great players, and there's a bunch of good ones, but let's say 15 that can play for everybody in the country. Well, 7 of them were going to go to OU, 7 were going to go to Texas, and 1 was going to go to A&M. But Notre Dame wasn't coming down there. Alabama wasn't coming there. USC wasn't coming there. Oregon wasn't coming there. Miami wasn't coming there. Penn State wasn't coming there. Ohio State. Now everybody's going everywhere, and these young men are leaving to go anywhere across the country. So that's what's making it even more difficult for OU in the recruiting world. Is you even though Texas is your backyard, and even though it's right down the street, man, you got all the top dogs. I mean, you go look at the top 10 in the country right now, in the top 25, everybody's recruiting in the state of Texas. And so it's becoming more difficult to recruit the number of really good players and bring to your program because of that.
I am under the impression, right, that because of that, there's more parity in the sport. And I'm thinking, I don't know how true that is, Coach, because I'm looking at the same programs tend to be really great and really good, right? I got the unenviable task of ranking all top 25 programs each and every week at Fox Sports. And come October 12th, I'm going to be moving and shaking. Come October 19th, I'm going to be moving and shaking. I wonder, with this new 12-team playoff, with how you're telling me that folks are recruiting from everywhere and they're recruiting everybody, do you think that there's more parity in the sport?
I do. I do think there is. In the middle of the pack, I do think there is. And there's also some teams that have jumped up in the top 10 because of the NIL. I mean, look at Ole Miss and Missouri. What are they doing in the top 10? They don't deserve to be in the top 10 in college football. They ain't never been in the top 10 in college football. I mean, maybe less than, count your fingers on your hand, and that's all out of respect to those guys. But they have gotten in the game because they have people that are supporting and giving money to buy players. And moving forward, if the NCAA doesn't get a hand on this deal, this NIL is going to run people. I mean, it is going to – if you don't have the cash, you are not going to be able to get legit players. And, and if you're going to try to play in the SEC, man, you better be spending a whole bunch of money because everybody else is spending a whole bunch of money. You look at the Big 12, for example, who's going to win that conference? You got Utah beat OSU last week, and they're one of the top ones. And Kansas State, people thought was one of the top ones. They just go get demolished by BYU, even though if you watch the game, I mean, it really didn't turn out the way it looked like it was going to turn out. So it's tougher. It really, really is. There's many more players that are coming out, RJ, that are more developed coming out of high school than there used to be. You got quarterbacks, you got receivers, you got DBs that are in 7-on-7, 6-7 months out of the year. There's some that are in 7-on-7 year round. There's kids out on the West Coast that are playing in Arizona. They're throwing the ball and catching the ball year round. So young men are coming out and they're even better. So there's just, if there used to be 20 good quarterbacks, now there's 40 kids that can go to college and play ball somewhere. You might have a quarterback. Well, look at the quarterback of James Madison last week that just lit up North Carolina. Where did he come from? Nobody was recruiting him. He threw for about 385 yards on those guys, and so I just think there's more better players that are out there that are getting developed and that are, further along. It's just trying to keep those guys on your team and trying to build those relationships and trying to have some chemistry is the biggest thing, because when you lose some guys, if you lose some guys to the NFL, like Coach Beanbo, you lose a guy to the NFL, one guy goes to the NFL that shouldn't go to the NFL. You had one guy transfer that wouldn't have transferred if there wasn't never an NIL deal. And then before you look at it, you go out and get a few transfer portal guys. And if you don't really hit on them, man, you're in a bad position. And so here's what happens in the NIL, the transfer portal recruiting. So during that time, you got everybody down the hallway who's in charge of recruiting and watching film. So they'll come down there and let's just say they give an offensive line coach the film. Well, they'll watch him. Oh, he's really good. I think he can play here. Okay, well, you take him to the offense coordinator. Well, he likes him. I think he can play here. Take him to the head coach. He likes him. So what do you got to do? You got to do a background check, okay? Well, you can't call that college he's at because that coach don't want to talk to you because that kid's leaving. So who do you call? They all call the same person, the
Hmm.
high school head coach. Well, what's he going to do? Well, 90% of them are going to say he's a great kid, he's a hard worker, you can trust him, he's a leader, this and that, da 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 da. They're all going to tell you the same. And then you bring him on a visit the following week, and he comes in and you offer him and he commits. You've had a week long relationship. You don't know anything about him, you know. So, man, it's just a challenging time what they're in right now. And sometimes you hit on these transfer guys, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you give players NIL money, and some of them don't deserve it, you know, and you end up losing out on some other guys. It's a challenge right now.
I appreciate that, Coach. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, not the least of which is just how right you got to be with your evaluations, specifically at that quarterback spot, because you brought up Alonzo Barrett at James Madison. I'm thinking about
Yeah,
Cam Ward, how he ends up at Incarnate Word because they ran
that's right.
1T, you know,
That's
and
right.
then all of a
That's
sudden
right.
that dude can sling it. But if you
Yeah.
miss on one of these guys, any of them, honestly, you got a problem. Like I was reading a story by a buddy of mine, David Ubben, writes The Athletic, does great work. He had this anonymous quote that, you know, for good reasons, said, look, are we going to pay $800,000 for a guy that's going to be a backup? Or are we going to try to put that in an impact wide receiver? Are we going to put that into a defensive lineman? And then I was thinking, you know, my daddy is going, I never have to worry about that. Once they get to campus, they're mine. Like until they go to the NFL. So I'm curious, knowing that you got to get these things right and these relationships have to be developed so quickly. What are the principles that you might be using as Cale Gundy to go, okay, I trust this or I don't trust this, or I'm gonna stand on the table for this, or what is it that you specifically know about your evaluations that would lead you to go, I like this kid?
Well, I mean, there's always a few things that, you know, for every position that, you know, coaches are looking for. You know, I wanted kids that were, first of all, that were great athletes. I wanted kids who loved playing football, kids that were tough, that come from good families and good backgrounds, and that you could coach them hard. You know, there's just a few things, core things that I just believed in. And if you had those things, but you weren't a good kid off the field, I didn't want you. I don't have time for it. I got to go on down the road. You know, so there were some things that I looked for, and I wanted to make damn sure that they that those young men had them, and then there's occasions that you're going to miss on. I mean, it happens, you know. So the challenges are there. It's harder and harder, and you know. But as a head coach, which I've never been a head coach, but if I was a head coach, you got to hold those guys accountable. You got to hold every single coach accountable. You better be bringing in players that can play. If you don't bring in players that cannot play, I'm going to fire you, and I'm going to go find somebody else to bring in players that can play. I mean, it's not a you know, it's not something that it's me against you. You know, I'm just telling you this is a business, and the severity of making mistakes or missing on people, we just can't do that anymore.
That is my favorite quote from Mad Men, Don Draper, John Hamm. That's what the money's for, right? Is what they
That's
would
right.
tell you. It's like, hey, look, these are the stakes, and I would argue that the stakes never been higher in college football.
That's right.
Not just because of what the money is looking like, but because we're expanding the playoff, and you're finding out that a television network like ESPN is going to pay $8 billion for the rights to the college football playoff. That tells you a lot about what's at stake here. Coach, I want to throw some players at you. We hadn't talked about
Yeah.
these before. So for the folks that don't know, but um, you mentioned some of these guys that are ready to play, and I've been pointing to folks going, Trevor Lawrence really pushed this to the forefront for a lot because that dude, he replaced the guy that got them to the playoff. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like he didn't just replace anybody. He replaced a really great player, in my opinion, Kelly Bryant, and ends up leading them to a national championship. I say that to say I'm looking at Ryan Williams playing wide receiver at Alabama. I'm looking at Jeremiah Smith playing wide receiver at
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking as a guy that went down to Texas and brought Adrian Peterson out of his living room in Norman. Do you tell that dude, hey man, you come up here, nobody's guaranteeing you a spot, but I've seen what I need to see. Just show me what I've been seeing, and you're probably going to play right away.
Well, I told him he had an opportunity because that's just who I am and that's how I am.
Okay.
And honestly, I think that AD and his daddy Nelson will tell you that's one of the reasons why we came to school there was because everybody else was just giving him everything, and that's not how AD was raised. That's not how Nelson raised him, and Benita, the mom, raised him. I mean, they they coached him, they taught him hard love every single day, and to nobody's going to give you a damn thing. You got to go out there and earn it. So we hit it off in a relationship just because from day one, that's how I was. And, I could have missed on it, but that's not what they wanted. They didn't want to hear that. Basically, this is a great opportunity for you here. I'm going to coach you every single day. 365 days a year. I ain't talking about football season. I'm talking about going to class. I'm talking about how you act in the cafeteria. I'm talking about how you walk across the street, just anything, life, man. I'm here to help you for 4 to 5 years or however many years that you're here. I'm here to coach you hard, but I'm going to love you harder. And so I had kind of developed that personality of kind of who I was, and they loved it. That's what they wanted. They didn't want the icing on the cake. That's not what they wanted. And still to this day, that's not who the Peterson family was.
I love that because you're standing on your principles, right? Which
Yeah.
number one, and then they're knowing where you are going to get moved or not be moved, right?
Yeah.
And number two, it's again speaking about my parents. My daddy is a retired sergeant in the Air Force. My mother's a retired captain.
Okay. That explains it.
Tells you how I was raised.
Yeah, that's right.
So being coached hard is just part of life.
That's right.
That said, a lot of my peers they weren't raised by retired military like me. So there are folks that absolutely want that, and then there are those folks that they want it the way they can get it. Coach, one more question I have for you before I let you go. I've been standing on the table since I could do this. Man, I'm coming up on half my life I've been spending covering this sport. I believe in the players that are from the state of Oklahoma. I believe that it matters a little bit more for them for obvious reasons. We're the hometown, we're the pro team in the state.
Yeah.
And most of them are raised to know that. I also am looking at guys, your brother Mike does a great job recruiting us. Brendan Presley's up there. Kendall Daniels is up there. And every now and again, he'll hit on somebody that was overlooked and playing quarterback in Texas comes his RB1, right? And Ollie Gordon. I'm curious, what do you think about the state of high school football in the state of Oklahoma?
It's really good. It's very competitive. It's really good. And again, I'll be honest with you, we overlooked it at times when I was at OU for many, many years. We took a bunch of players and had success, but we probably overlooked some guys as well. You got to believe in your system. And as a head coach and coach, you got to believe in yourself. I also took a lot of, when I was at OU, I took a lot of walk-ons, and I developed those guys, and those guys became starters. The Drake Stoops, the Lee Morrises. A lot of those inside receivers, Nick Basquin from Norman North. Those are guys that won championships, that I won championships with, because I believed I could develop them. I could teach them how to win and be really, really good. And so you got to believe in your system. You got to believe in yourself. And at the end of the day, man, you got to develop. It's just like today, with the world, look at Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold right now. Jackson Arnold's a redshirt freshman. Man, he's only played in 5 games, period. But we expect just because he was a 5-star and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country that he should be winning a Heisman his freshman year. That's the world we live in. Everybody wants greatness right now, and not everybody can give greatness right now. Sometimes it takes time. There's been so many players. I can go through Trent Williams for 3 years. He's the best offensive lineman maybe to ever play in the game. He's with San Francisco 49ers. We tried to run him off for 3 years. He was lazy, didn't want to come to workouts. Schmitty was on him. It was a mess, and he turned it around, Obo turned it around. Just so many guys, just because they're not great in year 1, year 2, we got to have patience with them, man. You got to have patience because they have the talent, but it's coaches' jobs to bring them along. It's coaches' jobs to develop and get that very best out of them and help them, good times or bad.
I love that, Coach. Obo Oronkro. Another guy,
yeah.
Parnell Motley. I was
is
he going to figure it out, man?
Oh, my gosh.
Is he going to figure it out?
Hey, I can go on down the list. There's guys that were all conference, all American players, guys that go in the NFL in their first, second year. No, they were nowhere close to it. They were lazy, didn't want to work. They weren't just as good players, but sometimes the light bulb, the light switch turns on a little bit later than everybody else. Sometimes it turns on a little bit earlier. We're going to get a chance to find out about Michael Hawkins Jr.
Mm-hmm.
I recruited his daddy. His daddy was a freak of an athlete, freak, but I know how he raised Michael Hawkins Jr., and he raised him hard. He loved him, and he coached him hard. Kevin Murray, Kyler Murray's dad, has coached Michael Hawkins Jr. to be in this position. We're going to see when he gets out there. I think he has the it factor. I'm not saying he's going to, be an all-conference player this year. I'm not saying they're going to go win 10 games with him, but that boy kind of has it, and that goes a long ways in recruiting and players nowadays.
Coach, if you allow me, I'm gonna speak to you from the standpoint of somebody who's watching these games, ain't in the room, but we see what we see with our eyes.
Yeah.
Trent Williams I saw Sergio Kendall beat up on him, and I'm going, is this who we are? Is this what it's gonna be? And he turns out to be the player that he is. To your point about it takes some time. To the point about Heisman's and wanting guys to be great, I say this, Coach. It's Oklahoma for a reason. And our expectations are expectations. Are they unfounded sometimes? Yes. Are we impatient? Yes. But that's because we can't play. Like, I forget who said this, but 3 million head coaches in the state of Oklahoma, only one of us is getting paid.
That's right. That's
how
good.
it feels. So if we come on strong, it's because we love it. It's because we love that program. And I think most people, they love their college football program, but it's losing is not what we do well over here. We are not patient people. So what would you tell us? What would you tell us?
I mean, you got to try to find a way to have some patience. The problem nowadays is social media. That's the problem, because, the minority is going to take to the social media for the most part. And the minority are the ones that are going to voice their opinion and be loud. And, we know everybody's got cell phone in their hand, everybody's got earbuds in their ears, so they're on social media and they're reading that stuff, man. And you can destroy these young men. You can destroy these young men. You really, really can. But that's not what this team needs. That's not what Oklahoma's offense needs right now. Trust me, there ain't nobody working harder than those assistant coaches in there. And I can promise you this: Brent Venables is on their ass. All those coaches in there. He was on them Saturday night. He's on them Sunday. He's on yesterday. He's on them today, because that's how he is, and he's on everybody. That's but that's part of being a great coach is you gotta help them through times and make sure that they're seeing what they're doing is the right thing for these young men. And but it's a group effort, man. It's everybody's got to be on the same page. Again, the OU defense is everybody has got to look at that the way they looked at OU offense for the last 10, 15 years or whatever. This defense is going to give you a chance to win games this year. It's going to give you a chance to win games this year. That hasn't happened in a long time around here. That has not happened in a very, very long time. And they played on a higher level Saturday night versus Tennessee than they played in the first three games. More, I know they got after Temple and they got after, Temple's terrible, but Tulane and Houston, I know they got after them, but they played better versus Tennessee, which is a much better team than they played against Tulane and Houston against their offense. So just hang in there. I know it's going to be rough, but it's going to become even more rough because you're in the SEC. And you look in the top offenses in the country right now, the top defenses in the country right now, there's probably about three of them in the top six that are on our schedule, that are on OU schedule this year, so it ain't going to get any easier. It's not going to get any easier.
Well, hey, look, punch me in the mouth and I'm bleeding. I'm still in the fight. That's
right.
Know. So
that's exactly right.
My goodness. Cale Gundy played quarterback at Oklahoma. When he left, he had virtually every passing record there was, and then he recruited players that were breaking them. Spent half your life you given Oklahoma, Cale, and 23 years as an assistant coach. Yeah. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, RJ. Thank you.